Okay, we're Group 48, and we're going to give a presentation on the worst accident in aviation history, which is the Tenerife airport disaster. Firstly, I'm going to give a brief introduction where I summarize all the events that happened on that day. Then we're going to give an analysis where we look at all the rule-based mistakes, all the knowledge-based mistakes, and all the latent conditions. And finally, we're going to give some advice to make sure that events like this don't happen again. Now, on March 1977, two Boeing 747s, one from KLM and one from Pan Am, were planning to land at Gran Canaria Airport when there was a bomb explosion. This meant that the airport had to close and that both planes needed to be rerouted, so they were planning to land at Tenerife Airport. Here they had to wait for a couple of hours before being able to go back to Gran Canaria Airport, but when they tried to take off, there was thick fog approaching, which meant that both planes lost visibility and weren't able to see one another. When the KLM plane was to take off, it needed to go on the runway, go to the other side of the runway, turn around 180 degrees and take off, while the Pan Am plane would follow the KLM plane before taking the fourth exit to the left. Now, because of some miscommunication between the KLM plane and the control tower, the KLM plane tried to take off while the Pan Am plane was still on the runway. This meant that the two planes collided, which meant that there was a crash where 583 people lost their lives. So now we're going to take a look at all the rule-based mistakes.
Yeah, as the global accident report is just stated, we can now look at the accident and then especially focus on the human mistakes that are made. First of all, we are going to focus on the rule-based mistakes, and afterwards we shed light on the knowledge-based mistakes. Well, the rule-based mistakes and the knowledge-based mistakes are made when a person's action went exactly as planned. However, they just did wrong, believing it to be correct. And as just said, the co-pilot of the KLM flight corrected the captain in the cockpit when taking off without clearance. However, the captain should have waited for clear sight. This can therefore be seen as a rule-based mistake. This also brings us to the second mistake, which was the veto of the captain to take off, whereas the co-pilot said he had to wait. Furthermore, in the cockpit of the KLM plane, there were some misunderstandings. This was caused by terrible circumstances regarding the weather and a radio height reading, which is a new frequency made by a high frequency and a low frequency, which changes the message from the tower to the cockpit. The rule-based mistake which flows out of this radio height reading is a lack of standardized definitions. The KLM captain asked the tower for clearance to take off. The tower said, "Okay, stand by for takeoff, I will call you." Due to the radio height reading, the KLM crew only heard the OK. As there were no standardized protocols and definitions, the pilot took off with only hearing the OK. So that were the rule-based mistakes. Now we're going on to the knowledge-based mistakes. And when focusing on the knowledge-based mistakes, the Pan Am flight was most prone for these mistakes. The crew of the Pan Am flight had successfully identified the first two taxiways, but couldn't be able to spot the third taxiway, which was their intended exit. However, the massive 747 couldn't make the 148-degree turn, so the tower had made a knowledge-based mistake. The tower believed that sending the Pan Am flight to the third taxiway was a doable option, whereas in the end it could never happen. For that reason, this can be seen as a knowledge-based mistake. Besides that, due to the misinformed captain by the radio, the captain had the assumption that he could take off. So, with the incorrect knowledge he had that mistake. He made that mistake. So these are the knowledge and the rule-based mistake. Now we're going on to the latent conditions.
There were, in addition, latent conditions that factored into the aviation disaster, starting with the bomb notification at Gran Canaria Airport, leading to an overcrowded Los Rodeos Airport at Tenerife. At around 4 p.m., local mist started developing, lowering visibility to below 200 meters, making it impossible for the pilots to react in time. And finally, the pilot of KLM thought he got the go-ahead to take off due to a phenomenon known as heterodyne, which was mentioned earlier. And this happens when two radio messages are transmitted at the exact same time, leading to only parts of the transmission being heard. When KLM told the radio tower ready for takeoff, the tower responded by OK, wait for instructions, but KLM only received OK. They took off, and the rest is history. Damien will give some advice to prevent this from happening again.
So, what to do in the future to decrease the likelihood of an accident? First of all, start with the usage of standardized definitions in the cockpit to ensure there is no miscommunication in the cockpit. Furthermore, there should be a more democracy in the cockpit to improve the communication as well. This way, both the co-pilot and the pilot interact on the same level. This way, the co-pilot can say what he wants without feeling pressured towards the pilot. Taxiing on the runway should not be allowed when an airplane is about to take off on that same exact runway. Although this should not be a problem if all safety measurements are followed, this will provide extra safety. When the weather conditions are poor due to fog, rain, or etc., and the control tower cannot see the airplanes anymore, no aircraft should be allowed to take off. Finally, to ensure all airplanes can see each other, ground radar should be compulsory. Hopefully, this video learned a lot from this accident, and accidents like this will never happen again.